think our second day there, like they're like, just walk down the hall and do whatever you want and you'll make everything better. And you're like, oh, that's crazy talk. These are really smart people here. But I mean, they kind of mean it. And so like the very first thing I did at Valve was I complained I really liked the game David Defeat Source. We were playtesting it internally. I'm like, the website sucks. And Greg Coomer's just like, well, why don't you just go do the website then? And so with Q, the graphic designer, we just redid the website. So yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah, during the Orange Box, the PlayStation was being done kind of out of house. The Xbox was being done in-house. And I was the first person who was like playing the full, if you remember, it also had like Half-Life in it and Half-Life 2 in it and everything else. So I was the first person playing through that on the Xbox and playing like a bunch of that stuff. And I realized that we just were not going to hit Q&A. Like we had no idea what certification was. And like, oh my God, were we failing? And I was pulling out the QA manual, like the certification manual, like we were failing everything. So went with John Morello, one of the animators, and we're both like, we've got to fix this. And so we just took over QA and essentially grabbed everybody's dev kit out of their offices, put them in the hallway, and started running this QA process. Because Morello is super, I am not detail oriented. I can try all my life. I never will be. He was. And so together we just kind of created this kind of testing plan. And I mean, that's not right. Like that's, to me, that's the fun thing at Valve. You see a problem, you act like it's your company, and how do you solve this? Well, I'm just going to go do this. And even like the flat hierarchy worked really well on like episode 1, where the flat hierarchy didn't work well when we had 3 teams doing different things, right? Like you started needing to have leads be a little bit more prominent. Excuse me. So like that's always been there. And but the underlying idea is that the person who is best to solve the problem and who understands it the best and working on it is the one doing the work and deciding the work, versus having like a designer sitting on top, just generating a bunch of paper designs and making engineers go off and do it. It's more of a collaborative process with that. And so I always think if somebody's really passionate and excited, you don't know how that expresses itself, and it doesn't always express itself in their craft exactly. And sometimes it just may be an idea, it may be a really good idea, and you just want to capture that idea and make sure it's there, right? And so it's like when we were writing, even for the Portal series, it'd always be like, hey, we're going to go off and record a bunch of stuff. Does anybody have things we should be putting in here? Like, does anyone have ideas? Like, always take those ideas and steal them and make them your own. But you should always be collaborative that way. And I think that's the strength of like kind of that Valve process. I think people get caught up in the flat and the handbook, and like there's a lot of garbage around it that isn't helpful. But that idea of just the people doing the work are kind of in charge of the work and are able to make their own decisions is an important part of it. And that's what scales. And inside of the teams, that scales and that works. And that's what we try to do as well. And it's not that there are no managers. It's that everybody's your manager. And so we're going to go ship Left 4 Dead 1. And an engineer comes up to me and is like, I think we really should package these as groups of 4. We should never sell the game solo. It's only fun with your friends. That's the only way this game's ever going to be successful. Okay, he has a valid argument that he's making. He's making it from a point of a bunch of information he has, talking about other examples and everything else. And then I have to be able to respond to it. I can't just be like, well, fuck off, right? Like, excuse me.
No, you can say that. It's fine.
Right. Like, you can't just say that. You have to be like, okay, you have to take that in and go, okay. And so then with that is, everybody can give you information, everyone can give you feedback, everyone can give you information, but that does not mean you need to act on it. What you need to do is go, okay, why are they saying this? What is their worry? What is their concern? Or is there a valid point here? Or are they right?
Because Valve doesn't really have a process per se. Like the process is sort of whatever you make it. So I wasn't coming in going, oh, okay, these are all the tried and true methods I use to make this work. It was sort of like, this is a different project than we've ever done with a different team than we've ever done with different people. So how are you going to make it work? Make it work, and I'm like, however old I was at the time, like 26. I'm like, great, thanks. So a lot of it was just trying to do it on the fly and, trying to find like management software that was all useless. And yeah, in the end, it was just all Google documents.
When you have a boss, you have somebody to complain about or somebody to blame, right? And when there's nobody above you, it really is a different you kind of have to, it's a real adjustment because there's no one but you, and eventually you learn it's your colleagues and it's putting a lot of trust in the people that are around you and realizing more importantly that they trust you, or gaining that trust. And so, yeah, that part was a big adjustment. I had just come from working on giant films, which
Yeah.
are about as hierarchical as it gets, and also there was definitely a lot of learning around, I'm a musician, right? And an experimental one, at that. And so, like I said, there's a lot of my investment as an artist has been in culturing emotions and really being able to, it's like an acting, like I said earlier, it's sort of like, you really are taking an emotion, amplifying it and overselling it through your guitar or your piano playing or whatever it happens to be. And, I got to Valve, and for Valve to function the way it does, everyone has to have a certain level of objectivity and sort of, making good decisions and making not impulse driven, I'm pissed off, like those are not the kinds of decisions you want to be making at a place like that. You want to be objectively thinking things through. And so it did take me a while to adjust just even my inner personality to not function more on an impulse level, which is kind of more the art side of things, typically speaking, and finding a way to meld those two things together. There is sort of a hierarchical structure of sorts. It's just not explicit. It's implicit, and it's ever changing. You know what I mean? Every project you work on, you kind of figure out where you sit and who you trust, and also like who on this project needs to be given responsibility or given power, right? Because, there's always going to be somebody who's going to lead or that is going to manage all the bug triage or whatever. And as long as you're watching and paying attention, you can grant them that power over you, and if other people see you doing that, then as a group, we all sort of end up agreeing, hey, we're going to let this person, let is not quite the right word, but we're going to, observe their necessity for having a certain amount of power. Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's, people act like it's a really, and I know when I got there, I was just like, now I remember having dinner with Gabe and going, this is just bullshit. Now, come on, like, tell me, how does this actually work?
The problem is with 300 employees and there isn't, I don't know exactly the breakdown, like how many of them are on the production side versus Steam business side versus legal versus whatever.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
There's a lot of opportunity cost to taking 75 people and trying to get a game made. Like there's as much as it seems like Valve often isn't, there's just a bunch of people sitting around sipping gin and tonics by a pool. Everybody's working. They're working all the time. It's just you don't always see it doesn't always end up coming out, or it comes out years later, or it gets turned into something else. So everybody is accounted for, I guess is what I'm saying. People are all doing something. So you almost have to take them, it's like a revolution. You'd have to stir up a bunch of people to leave what they're currently working on and come work on something else. Yeah, and there's games or
stuff that gets canceled.
There's prototypes. Canceled is even too top down, too authoritarian a word, I guess. Sometimes stuff just falls apart. Like it becomes clear to people that this just isn't working out. Or like I was just describing, something's kind of going along and maybe it's not turning into the thing that everybody had hoped it would turn into, but it's still a group of people and you're all sort of working on it together, and you don't always want to admit that. And then slowly people peel off to go work on something else that's been proposed. It makes it sound insane, and makes more sense when you're there. It's not as chaotic as I'm probably making it sound.
But
yeah, there's a high quality bar, and part of that is because by the time something reaches like full production mode, there is a lot of buy-in from people, and there are people working on it because they want to work on it.
Right.
So yeah, there's a lot of enthusiasm usually in that middle part, and then there's just despair, and by the end, everybody's sad and ready to be done.